when I think of marketed, I'm thinking about the actual psychology of the content. Like he treats it how you should treat a podcast, which is you test it. You're a detective.
Okay.
He's testing sales messages.
Mm-hmm.
He's testing people for commitment to like lower value things for new offers. So he's using it as like a testing ground. Like, what are people going to react to? You know, if I make this cool offer, will they opt in? And he's on constantly like a few new outros every month.
Drinking again, Daxy.
Coffee.
Right. It's time for another episode of the Cold Star Project, and I am super pleased to have Daxy Perez on, who is a podcasting genius. And I have not talked to anybody about building audiences for podcasts on this podcast, which is the Cold Star Project. If you stumbled in here by accident, the topic is the unexpected challenges of scaling. We get punched in the face and tell you about it so that you don't have to. And so Daxy is the host of a group on Facebook called Podcast Success Secrets. And there's about 1,000 people in there and growing. And I've seen his content. I've seen him working hard over the last year on this specific topic, and it's been a lot of fun, and he has some great insights. So thanks for being here, Daxy.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, man. I still remember you were like probably one of the first people to engage in my group. And we're going to be investing a lot more to grow it heavily. Like it's all just grown organically. So there's some really cool things happening soon in there. So yeah.
Exactly. So, and you run a business called Legacy Podcasting, which we'll dig into a little bit later. So let's get started. Rather than, and we talked a bit about this before the show, but I'm going to repeat it for our listeners and viewers. I did not want to have you on to say, get this kind of microphone, get this kind of camera, because it's stupid and there's no one perfect way to do things, right? Instead, in the content that I've seen from you, it's a lot about like growing your audience, and there's a whole bunch of stuff that I need to apply on my own podcast. I'm as inept as the next guy, except I'm consistent. I produce content. So that's what's the important thing here. So let's begin with a basic question. Who is the best target audience for listening to podcasts? Because I know I created a bunch of content. I got on LinkedIn, and I'm starting to talk to like factory managers and stuff, and they don't listen to podcasts. And I was like, damn it. I've created something for an audience that isn't listening to what I have to say. So where's a good target audience to start with?
Yeah. So, I mean, that question to me, it's like if people have ears, then there's a potential that they could listen to your podcast. But so a situation like that, a way to avoid that where you're like, man, I made a podcast that no one's going to listen to is, doing some research, figuring out who's already like proven this kind of like, broad market. So if you didn't see anything like that out there, then the odds are much lower. It's weird. Like right now, females are a great target because they love listening and they just love community. Obviously, they relate more with other females. So just a heads up. And it's actually aging down now. Like younger like I think 12 to 24 is the fastest growing demographic, which I mean could or not, probably not relevant to you, but could be. So yeah, I mean, I don't think there's a best. I think it's a platform that's very universal. It literally like any language could do it. And obviously, it's much easier or like different demographics. It's much more suitable for them to listen if there's an intended result.
Right.
And sometimes it's laughter. They just want to laugh, or some people like crime shows. So there has to be an intended result to it, listening to it, for that market to want to listen to it. So there has to be a pain point they want solved. So,
but it doesn't have to be about entertainment. I'm not going to get up and do any tap dancing,
Oh no, if you're going to do that, you better do it on video, because everyone wants to see that on video.
Right, right. Well, we do put a version of this up on YouTube. So,
sweet.
Okay. So there is a thing that I call from my sales training days, the danger of the two sales, which you've highlighted here. And it's a situation where somebody creates something and then they go out into the target market and find that the level of awareness is very low for the problem that this thing is solving. So, and that's just what you've talked about. And the mistake that I made was creating a solution for something that people weren't aware that they wanted, needed, or whatever. So that's where I'm saying is like, find people who are already interested in listening to podcasts and then create one for them to listen to, right?
Yeah.
Because if you're trying to jump straight to, hey, they're going to listen to this. Well, no, they're not even listening to anything. It's not that they're ignoring you. It's that they're not listening to anything.
Yeah.
So
And it's just
the
blue ocean
research will
strategy
do it.
where I'm sure you're familiar with the blue ocean strategy where you could be too blue, you know, you could be talking about like VR, like all day, but it's like, no one's applying it. So it's like, I learned from one of my mentors, Steve Larson, it's the purple ocean. So you want to have a blue message for a red ocean. Speak to a red ocean. Like I speak to a red ocean. I speak to podcasting, but I kind of have a blue message where it's like different, you know? So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, the biggest things that I've seen from you that are different are about getting listens, getting the consumption of it. I haven't seen anybody talking about the numbers that you're talking about. So, and I need to get my butt in gear in applying some of the things to get that result. So, okay, what is the biggest thing that you see maybe existing podcasters or wannabe podcasters who haven't taken action yet? What are they missing that is blocking the growth and effectiveness of their show?
Okay, so I mean, it's probably more than one thing usually because it's just like a cascading effect. I would say for most people, it all starts with the messaging and who's the who. Like, who are you speaking to, and what are you helping them with? Like, why are they listening? Like, what's the desire they want? Like, what's the struggle they're going through? That's the reason they'll listen to your show. So having that clearly defined, and what's blocking their growth, I would say, is you have to master one channel for traffic. Like podcasting is great, putting it out there, but no one is like searching the podcast app for new podcasts like that religiously. Because there's a lot of people releasing podcasts. So you have to have a communication channel or a platform where you're communicating for your just marketing episodes, marketing new content, where you're like talking to your audience, whether that's email, Instagram, something where you're like the people who are listening to you, you're reminding them, and you're building rapport with them. And then you have to have and sometimes this could be the same platform, but one for discoverability. So people who don't know you can find you, you know, and that has to do with mastering and understanding one platform first before trying to shoot out to all these platforms. Figure out one platform where you could game the algorithm, you know, figuring out the messaging or whatever to get new people to figure out who you are. That means optimizing your profiles, optimizing your micro content, your hooks to get people to the podcast. You know, for some people that might be Pinterest if you're a woman, because there's a lot of women on Pinterest, and Pinterest, like every photo is a link, which is awesome. People really underestimate Pinterest. Some people is Reddit. I know people who grow their podcasts from Reddit. Like they're just in all the subreddits and talking about some controversial topics, and they're like, we talked about it on my podcast. So there's a ninja ways. It's just figuring out which algorithm you're gonna hack, you know? So yeah.
This is definitely an area that I suck at.
Yes, dude, figure one out that you want to hack. And then just go all in on it. So
very
could be SEO. Some people are hacking the SEO game, which obviously is not as fast as other ones, but yeah.
Okay. So that bleeds into my next question, which is what can podcasts, see what I did there, Red Ocean? What can podcasters do to increase their audience size? So,
so there's a little bit of overlap there. Like I said, you know, mastering one platform. But the most obvious is, you know, is growing using OPP, you know, which means other people's platforms. So people who already have an audience, and collaborating with them. And, you know, like something I like doing is, you know, whenever I'm going to interview someone on Facebook Live or something, I'll just do like an Instagram story and I'll tag them. And then I'll have a swipe up to my Facebook group. They'll repost it, and like I'll obviously have a hook in that story. I'll treat it like it's an ad. Because honestly, it's an ad. It's getting shown to a bunch of people, and I have 15 seconds of their time. And I'll say, hey, we're going to talk with so-and-so about how he did this. And if you want to listen, swipe up to my Facebook group. He'll repost it because he's like, oh, this is free marketing for myself.
Right.
You know, so you're setting up a win-win. So collaborating with people who have the audience of the people who would listen to your show. Because I can collaborate with like Oprah, but I don't think their audience really would listen to, like the conversion rate's going to be low. But if I collaborate, but if I collaborate with the right people, so I would say that's the easiest way to grow your show. You know, if you go too high of influencers, they're not going to shout you out, you know? So start with like micro influencers, people who are maybe at the same level as you, who would easily just like, you know, cause they're not doing interviews all day. They'll easily just repost it. And then work your way up. So.
Okay. And I see this working on YouTube as well. There's a bunch of like martial arts / weapons guys, and I'm not like a killer ninja guy, but I follow a lot of these people like Shadversity and Metatron and a bunch of other guys. And they do these, Lindy Beige, they do these overlapping, appearing on each other's channels videos where they're both there, and sometimes they're not even in the same room. They'll do a green screen and appear and talk to each other or something like that, and make a video where it looks like they're in the same room, but they're actually not, right?
Yeah, a lot of gamers do that too. They collaborate, and that's one of the easiest ways to grow. I would say one key mindset to have when you're doing that is, come from the abundant mentality, not the scarcity, because, people think that they don't want to, so it has to do with, collaboration over competition. So my Facebook group, I interview a lot of other podcasters, people with agencies, people who run podcast media, and I'm not scared that they're going to take my audience because they're doing the same, they're teaching the same stuff, So if you're like a health coach and you don't want to interview other health coaches because you think you're the best health coach, then you're doing your audience a disservice because they might know one thing that you don't know, or, because if they shut you out, and they're obviously a health coach, so they have people who are listening to them. So you have to, have that mindset where you want to interview people who are like you as well in the market. Don't think that they're going to steal your audience or your audience is going to go to them, Right. One of the biggest mistakes I see people making. So,
okay, let's dig into that mindset a little bit more. What other mindset tidbits can you share?
So like something that you mentioned in the beginning of this episode is like consistency is like the most important. Like people like love setting, and I just made an episode about this, setting the right targets and goals. Like people love setting these lofty like download numbers and subscribers targets, but then like, the numbers show that most people quit. Like, and it has nothing to do with the numbers because they have false expectations. And the most important number is the consistency, the commitment, just showing up, because the personal transformation in the start, unless you're someone who already speaks on stage all day and you know how to like communicate, and it's like, you're not going to transform much from doing a podcast, then whatever. But if like, that's one of the biggest objections I get, even from clients, people who pay me money, like it's the biggest objection usually is like, all right, Daxy, what do I say? I'm like, what the hell? Why do you want to? Not the time to ask.
Yeah, thinking about a podcast.
Yeah. But I still help them, obviously. But that is one of the biggest things that stops people, and it stops the commitment because they don't know what to say. So just showing up and being committed is like the biggest, the most important mindset. So.
I know from my own experience. I don't know how far. I mean, it's about 60 episodes, but I had a couple of breaks and stuff, and we had a hurricane here last fall that knocked me out for about 6 weeks. And my intention doing this was, I didn't know what it was going to turn into. I didn't know what we were going to talk about other than scaling, right? And I didn't care actually where it ended up. And I also I still don't today. I don't really count downloads, listens, things like that, right? I'll look occasionally, but to me, I'd rather affect 6 people heavily than lightly brush 500, or something like that, right? Yeah, I mean, it just, for me, consistency, and it has not been hard work. And I've enjoyed the hell out of it, and I've enjoyed the people that I've met. There have been tons of people who I have met who I wouldn't have been able to connect with as easily as I have without a show to bring them on, right? And to talk about, and then they've expressed themselves and enjoyed that. And I've ran into this a lot with other podcast founders who are ahead of me. They're 2-3 years into it, and they've said the same thing to me, in that when they got into it, they were just committed to doing the show. Right? They didn't care about the numbers. They didn't have these download links. And they told me for the first year, it was the same experience. Not many downloads in the numbers, but the people that they met were awesome. And the network building that they were able to do was really, really important. So,
yeah, I mean, it's a long-term thing. Like, you're documenting your life. So people come in with the short-term mentality. They like, which is like what most of these other platforms are like. They think like launching a podcast is like launching a product. It's not really. It's like starting a book. It's like, all right, now there's a lot more work to do. So
yeah, never ending chapters too. So who do you believe has the best marketed podcast in the last couple of years?
That's an interesting question. Because it's obviously subjective, because there's way too many podcasts out there.
And we don't know what we don't know. Yeah. But
exactly.
From what you've seen, I'm curious.
So it's interesting too, because literally this whole year, the only podcast I listen to is like my clients, because that's my job, to listen to their stuff. So, I mean, I'm definitely biased, but I would say, Steve Larson, from Sales Funnel Radio, because we work with him, but, it's because when I think of marketed, I'm thinking about the actual psychology of the content. Like, he treats it how you should treat a podcast, which is, you test it. You're a detective. Okay. He's testing sales messages. He's testing people for commitment to like lower value things for new offers. So he's using it as like a testing ground. Like, what are people going to react to? You know, if I make this cool offer, will they opt in? And he's on constantly like a few new outros every month with new music. So he's testing, event funnels and coaching, consulting, like so many things he's testing, which I think is smart to do with a podcast with attention. So he's my favorite. So yeah.
Okay. So is there, just leading off that then, is there a frequency that you would recommend?
Yeah. So, but also just to go back a little bit, that also goes into what you were saying before. He's about depth, not really width. So everyone who's listening, it's a really deep conversation happening. So frequency, that I would recommend.
I guess, yeah. Like I try to do one a week. If I do a group one and a personal one, that's fine too. But sometimes, again, I don't have anything I want to talk about. So
so minimum one a week. Ideally every day if you could, but no, but that's pushing it. So the main thing is to be proud of your work. Right. Like value someone's time. Like, don't just like make it, because people will easily split if they feel like they're not like if they feel like the quality is diminished, they'll unsubscribe. And then that's very hard to come back from. When someone unsubscribes, they're like, probably will never reconsider it. They might in the future, but if they're following you on other platforms. Right. So I'm a fan of quality over quantity. And then once you feel like you're getting the engagement and return you want, then you can kind of double down on the quantity.
And I want to reiterate this for our listeners and viewers. It's going to take you a while if you start a podcast to find your voice, narrow in on your topic, be the person that you need to be on this show, right? You're not going to come out of the gate and have it be perfect. I mean, sometimes I feel I need to remind people, I had years and years of doing interviews with people, right? Interviewing people and being interviewed before I started this podcast. I mean, years. You can go back and look at Sales Call Overhaul with the Closing Engine, right? Which was the podcast that Jeremy Pope and I ran for this. A lot of experience there. And again, an evolution over a year and a half of running.
I think that's one of the things people underestimate the most about a podcast, is that the whole thing is like, you follow frameworks, you follow models, but like 80% of it is discovery. Right. Like you just figuring out like, ooh, I like this, or I want to try this, or I want to say this. And then you're like, oh, I like how people responded. Oh, I like how that feels. Like, oh, I just made that up. And then that becomes your new way of thinking. So it's a very much a discovery process of yourself. So
yeah, I can remember a point in 2017 when I started looking at sports podcasters to see with like two hosts, because that's what I was doing at the time, about how they kind of passed the ball back and forth, and who was the leader and who was the secondary person, and how they swapped those roles.
The dynamic.
And I learned a lot.
It's interesting because period. Like the sport, it's really interesting looking at the sports podcasting from afar, because the players are like starting the best podcast now. Like even like on ESPN and stuff, like all the hosts are the players. And I think that just has to do with like social media, and that brands are more popular. They're more leverageable because people like remember faces. That didn't happen back in the day, Right. So with Will Chamberlain, like he didn't have any access to media. So yeah.
But I guess the point of view of being able to say, this is what happened on the court, right?
Yes.
I was there. I helped with that play, or it happened against me, right?
It's more congruent, The messaging is more congruent. So
Makes a lot of sense. So I don't know if you'll be able to answer this next question then, and no is perfectly fine because of what you were saying about you've only been listening to your clients' podcasts over the last year or so. Is there anyone who you feel is like underrated, like they've really got good content but nobody's heard of them? And what's the difference? What's that underrated host doing wrong or differently that they're missing out on?
Yeah, so it's funny. I'm giving you the same answer. I actually think it's Steve Larson, like super underrated.
Okay.
And so I will give a critique, and I've told him this before actually, or he might have remembered when I said it. I don't remember if he's listening by any odd chance. But like one thing, and it's intentional on his part, which I get. He doesn't do, and I think it's why he hasn't like he's grown very well because he speaks to a community of people, which is like one of the easiest ways to grow is speaking to a community of people, because then you know their problems and you know their desires. You know, I sell to a community of people because I know what they want. You know, so yeah, that's just one thing to consider. But he hasn't like done much guest appearances or media appearances to like really take it to the next level, to like really get that like exponential growth. He's just done it a lot of organically and like collaborating with other people in the community. So building like deep roots in a community rather than like trying to spread a little bit, which I think is he would benefit from a lot, because I know for sure like one of the most common questions I get from people who want to get into podcasting is like, how do I monetize a podcast? And I don't think people really understand what they're asking when they say that. Like the real question is like, the real thing they're asking is, how do I monetize attention? Because like monetizing is like, podcasting is just a medium.
Yeah.
Monetizing is a whole nother thing. You have to have the right messaging. You have to have the right offers. There's so much more behind it that like, obviously there's different methods on podcasting, like affiliate marketing and like, you know, like what offers you have, membership, like there's different models, coaching, consulting, but like the actual act of monetizing is different from the podcast, you know? So yeah, just to go back to the question, I think Steve Larson's underrated.
Awesome.
Because he teaches that stuff. He teaches how to create. He's like the offer guy, the offer king.
Right. Yeah, and you were saying he was testing. I actually think that's smart to build the deep roots before branching out, because I believe it is smarter to develop your voice and develop the clarity on the direction, what you're saying, how you're saying it, and what works before you jump out there and try and partner with a bunch of people.
And this is just some insider info. This is just some insider info. He might switch away from sales funnel radio just because he started that when he worked at ClickFunnels, and he doesn't want to be known as that guy anymore, sales funnel guy. He wants to be known as the offer guy. So we might be doing something new here soon. Okay. But he learned a lot. He discovered a lot. So
yeah, and it'll make him 10 times better for the next thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, we've talked a little bit about what it takes to share a podcast and get traction and stuff like that. Like folks need to get into this with the long-term view and that. What would you say to folks who have been hovering for a while on the idea of starting a podcast and that? What could they ask themselves to filter themselves for a final decision on, yes, should I jump into it, or no, this really isn't for me?
Yeah. So I'll just share an experience that I had when I first started. So one of my first podcasts I started, and it actually did significantly well. And looking back, I'm like, wow, that did pretty good. It was a health podcast, and talking about superfoods and how to like detoxify and like just really like naturopathic things. And I was interviewing a lot of people, and because I stuck to one platform, Instagram, I was able to kind of tap into that market of like all those hashtags and like grow quick. I got a couple thousand subscribers, and I was building an audience. But that's when I ran into the problem or the realization that starting a podcast around your passion isn't really the best idea, because I love music, you know, I love eating healthy, but I have nothing to serve those people with, you know, like I could build an audience in the health thing, but I don't want to become a health coach. I don't sell supplements. Like, I don't want to, like, there's no other way I can help them. So what's the point of me building an audience? Like how am I enriching myself in that experience other than just like talking? And then it becomes a job. So I would say first thing is to consider, you know, passions are great, but first figure out how can you help people? Like, what can you do right now? Like, and think about it in a value ladder point of view, or just like tied to your business or whatever, or it could be what you want to do. like what you want to help people with. And then if you're starting out, it could be like, hey, follow me along in this journey because I want to learn how to help people do this. And I'm going to use this podcast to learn from the best people. And then eventually I'm going to sell you some shit. Like, not say it like that, but that I would say that's the biggest thing. Figure out what promise do you want to give people who are listening, what is your promise? And then that it'll be much easier to get people to like, actually opt into all your things, because you have a unique promise. So yeah.
Right. Okay.
I would say that's the biggest thing to get clear. Like
that health thing just made me think you could create an affiliate business with that, like an audience for hire kind of thing, right? And then the supplements come from somewhere else, but
that's 100%. That's 100% right. Yeah. But that's still,
if it's not what you want to do.
That's still, that's not the model I want to go.
Exactly. So. Okay. So if you can't get clarity on that, it's probably not for you. How long should people who are considering podcasting, who are not just on the shiny object bandwagon thing of the month, right? They know they're really interested in this, they like it. How long should they put into finding that target market, finding that promise before they go, you know what, it's just not there, I need to move on?
That's a good question. How long should they put into that? So one of the first things to do is decide like who the person is, like I was saying earlier. Yep. Really paint a picture, an avatar of who your ideal person you want to help is. And then once you have that nailed, and then you could figure out like what you need to make, like either content wise or offer wise to, make their life better, then just go, okay. Paint a show around that attracts them, whatever, using keywords or whatever. And then just start, testing pieces of content or just, documenting. Obviously, depending on what phase in life you're at in your business, it would look a little different how you communicate, right. Like Expert Secrets talks about the different attractive characters. You could be the reporter. You could be like someone who's like, hey, I'm starting out, follow along on my journey. This is what I want to reach to. You're telling people, you're setting your kind of, how do you say it? You're calling your mark, you're calling your shot. Mm-hmm. And then people just love watching transformation and following journeys. So yeah.
Huh. Okay. Which is not at all what I did starting this podcast, I need to say. I don't have an opt-in. Like it's crazy, right? Like it's something that I need to correct. But I get business because people listen to 10 of these things and they go, holy crap, here's the guy who's at the center of all this stuff. And I'm going to go talk to him. So he must know how to help me. So that's a slightly different model.
Opt-ins could be anything. Mm-hmm. I think that something that could go before opt-ins that's still valuable is communication. So getting people to like, hey, like, if you like this or you have any questions, just DM me, like being open. Like that's what so getting people on a call or whatever is like if you don't have any opt-ins, just do that first. And then, yeah.
Awesome. What can podcast hosts do today that would make their lives easier? What do you see them stumbling over again and again and again, where you were just like, just do this, take this pill and call me in the morning?
Oh man. Yeah, that varies per person, dude. So I would say, not trying to like complicate the process and figure out, what you're comfortable with, and actually just focusing on like the quality of the content, and actually like the messaging and making sure it aligns with your person. Because a lot of people do interview shows and such, and it's like they're doing it for themselves, which is great, but it kind of like isn't on target with like the overall core message of the podcast, I feel like. So yeah, I don't know if that completely answers your question. That's a hard one, dude. Yeah, I forgot the question now.
Okay. What could people do today? Podcast hosts do to make their lives easier.
Oh, podcast hosts.
Should they be delegating part of the production process?
Oh, yes. Okay, so I missed the host part. Yeah. So figure out what tasks are repetitive that you can outsource, and just document it. Whether it's a Trello checklist or a Microsoft doc, be like, all right, this is the first step I take. This is the next step. Like literally just record everything, and then literally just hire someone to Upwork for a few dollars an hour. Like, hey, I just need you to do this. And that's one of the biggest things I see hold people back, because it takes so much time and effort. They end up doing like a real-time show, meaning like like, hey, I don't have content this week, I have to record now. Like, hey, I don't have content this week, I have to like over every week, you know, rather than just like, all right, I got someone who can do everything. Let me record a bunch of episodes and then schedule it out. So
have them do it. Okay. Awesome. So what does legacy podcasting do, your business?
Yes. So we help. So we have a market we target, which are more premium influencers, people who are making like some of them like 6 figures or more a month, who have audiences, who have sales funnels, who have offers. They know their messaging. So it's great for me. I spend less time on the phone with them. We help those type of people, mainly in the digital space, but we're actually moving a little bit more into the B2B space. We help them launch a podcast. We treat it like a product launch, building a lot of hype, doing giveaways, getting them a new and noteworthy, in developing a full strategy that aligns with the goals of their podcast, whether that's, you know, to sell an event 1 year from now, or to, you know, sell courses every launch, every quarter. We try to help them develop a strategy, and then we just do like the mainly like the work, like the production and distribution of everything every month. Whether it's all platforms, we do guest booking, guest communications, literally like the people we work with, they're high level, and the thing they care about the most is time. So like anything that would take their time, we take off their plate.
Okay. Very nice.
So yes.
So what, you've got a podcast success secrets group on Facebook, and folks can go there and ask to join. What are they going to get in there? And is there something they should sign up for once they're in there? How does that work?
Yes. So actually, when you join the group, one of the questions is if you would like our guide. It's a 150-page, 170-page actually guide to podcasting, ultimate guide, like literally step by step, like, you know, a little bit of the strategy and actually how to create the accounts, like the techie stuff that isn't fun to talk about, which mic to buy, all the equipment and stuff is in that guide. So we probably going to make it a book in the future, but we're literally just made it. We're just like, let's give it away for free, you know? So you get that when you join the group. And then I also interview, my goal kind of is to interview a lot of other big podcasters and to figure out, hey, what are you doing and what's working, and kind of get some behind the scenes knowledge, which I have been getting, which is pretty cool. It benefits me and my agency, but it also, like, people who are watching in the group, they can get benefit out of that too. So yeah, it's pretty much the main goal of my podcast. So yeah. Okay.
And you've got a course that people can buy. I know, because my former business partner bought it, and
we had one. We kind of transitioned it into. We're probably gonna make more, but we've actually when we just did our first round, it went really good. We transitioned it into a launch challenge. So 21 days. It's pretty much our launch process, and it's all like, you know, it's just a typical challenge. Like every week and every day, kind of like action steps to take. 21 days later, you have your podcast out with a great strategy and kind of aligned with your long-term vision. So our next round, we're probably going to do next month. And it's fun because we're going to make it like way cheaper. Like the last one was $1,000 and we like sold out pretty quick. But that's because we were doing some done for you components, which isn't scalable, which isn't fun. Let me just tell you guys that if you're going to make a challenge, don't have done for you components. But the next round is going to be like a $97, and there's going to be a few like upsells for like coaching and stuff. But other than that, it's pretty like, we just want to get as much people to get started. And like, literally, like, we're going to dump in a lot of like 80 plus videos of obviously relevant videos. And we're pretty excited because we're going to get affiliates on board, and we're really trying to like make a dent in the podcasting industry and like stamp our ground. So
awesome. All right. Anything you want to finish off with? Something that you'd like to say to either podcast hosts who have a show or folks who are thinking about it?
Yeah, keep going. Don't quit. If you have any questions, like specific, because I'm sure I can't hear what you guys are thinking right now, just hit me up on Instagram. I am Daxy. And thanks so much for having me on, Jason.
You bet. Appreciate it. Thanks for being here. My guest today has been Daxy Perez, who owns Legacy Podcasting and is the founder of the Podcast Success Secrets group on Facebook.